All right, this is VirtualPBX Dash online training. I'm going to give people a few minutes to get in just because I started just a tad early. But you should be able to see our Dash login page, actually the VirtualPBX login page, because there's a couple options here. And all right. So let's go ahead and get started. So Dash is VirtualPBX's latest product. It's basically a new PBX system built from the ground up. Has a wholly different interface from our long-term product, the vConsole. So if you're a vConsole customer, this will look very different. And actually, unless you just migrated or about to migrate to Dash from vConsole, this probably doesn't have a lot of utility for you. And in case you're looking for vConsole training, you'd actually want to go under support, and then also under vConsole support. And there we have our full trainings available there for you to look at. Now for Dash, if you scroll down here, this is your first login. This is to get into your actual dashboard. This is where you control everything, set up users, et cetera, et cetera. Your standard users who aren't admins would also use this login page to view like their voicemails, for example, or set up call forwarding. Down below, we have the VirtualPBX web phone. So this makes use of a web browser to make and receive calls. This is only available on Dash. It is technically a VoIP device. And it only really works right now on Chrome and Firefox. Yeah, obviously we want to make sure those are up to date. We are working on getting this on Safari and Edge as well. However, those, as far as I know, have not yet gone live. And another caveat is that the web phone doesn't currently work on mobile versions of those browsers. So just desktop versions of Chrome and Firefox. And then down here, we have the VirtualPBX vConsole login. So this is for those of you who have been with us for several years. But we'll go ahead and click on Dash. Opens up a new tab. And here is your login. So your username is going to be an email address. Password, as self-explanatory. And your account name, usually your company name. For this purposes, I'm using a test account. If you ever forget your information, you have the link here to recover your credentials. And then you click sign in. Oh, invalid credentials. Because I used the wrong password. Get on this one. All right, and so now you see I have my dashboard. So this gives you a quick snapshot of my system. Total number of users. These are fully featured user agents, are typically just for people who are in your ACD queues. For those of you coming from vConsole to Dash, ACD queues are more expensive on Dash. And that's mostly because Dash also has what's called ring groups, which is what many vConsole customers were using ACD queues as. So there's a different set of functionality between the two. Total devices, so cell phone, soft phone, SIP phone, web phones, etc. And also tells you how many are not registered. If you ever see the term registered phone in any of the documentation for Dash, that is referring to a VoIP phone on the system, and by registered, I mean it's actually connected to us. All right, next up here, you have your main numbers. All your main numbers act the same way. So they will all have the same main greeting. They'll all have the same routing. Now you can still have numbers DID directly to a user, or directly to a ring group or an ACD queue, etc. So no worries there. Your fax box number, again, you can have a fax box on your system. It will be a different number than your main numbers, and then faxes will be sent to a dedicated user, typically speaking. Total numbers, this is a total number of essentially customer-facing phone numbers, so people who dial into your system. And then the breakdown between US and local, or US DID would be local numbers, toll-free would be toll-free numbers. You have your company directory, which you can download. The account ID, you can always use this number to identify yourself to VirtualPBX. We can all look it up and find out what account you are. Account realm, this is typically used for your VoIP phones as well as for faxing, or faxing out, I should say. All right, up here we have caller ID. This is your account caller ID. And actually, you'll notice here that I'm also being prompted to set up my E911 on your main number. That's also handled by up here. So you can this is the phone number, obviously. So this is the number that appears when you make outbound calls from your VoIP devices. For your company name ID, you can have up to 15 characters, including spaces, show up here. And then here, you would put in your E911 address. And then you click on Save Changes. And once it goes through, little banner goes away. And you'll see here now that this has got that E911 there, inbound CNAME, and PPAD. Hold music, this is basically your account default hold music. If you want, and you can upload a file. And then you click on this icon here to upload. Basically, Dash accepts MP3 and .wav files. I believe right now we're having a small issue with uploads, so files are right now restricted to 1.5 megs. And our engineers are working on that. It should be larger than that, typically speaking. Hours will take you into a separate subsection, which we can get into, but I want to go to our main number first. All right, so main number, if you click on here, you'll see your main numbers. Little gear icon, this allows you to change things like the caller ID, the E911, and the prepend. Now, prepend only works with VoIP phones. This allows you, and here we'll go to this one, since it doesn't have one yet, to put text in front of it. So this allows you and your staff members to know, oh, this is a call that came from this other phone number, or for this other, because of this other project. You can always add numbers from your spare numbers list. So basically, spare numbers are numbers you're not currently using, or you can buy numbers. And you have your option for local and toll-free. Say you want to go to San Jose area code. And you would simply just click add and buy numbers. Now the system says buy numbers. That's just how it adds numbers to your account. If you've just signed up and you get at least 2 free numbers associated with your account. You don't have to start with an assigned number to begin. So you just get signed up, you start logging in. You don't have phone numbers. Adding those first 2, you still use buy, but the system isn't going to charge you anything for those first 2 numbers because you get 2 as part of your plan. And then you see I have the new number, got the little gear icon, so I can add caller ID information, E91 feedback. Next up, we have office hours strategy. By default, you're going to be on 24-hour open office, meaning you're open 24/7. Or what a lot of people do, custom office hours. You scroll down, put a check mark next to each day you're open, and then put your open hours in military time or 24-hour time. One thing to notice is right down here, are you closed for lunch hours? And then you can enter your hours. So basically, if your whole office or business closes for lunch, you could check that, and then you would have a separate menu for when you're closed for lunch. Or you can just uncheck it and not be closed. Purely up to you. Next up, we have office holidays. So you can enter your holidays for the year ahead of time and basically say, hey, we're going to be closed. And then set them up. Now, on holidays that they change their date, you'll have to change them year to year. Notice that there is no year field on any of these. So what we've started running into, since Dash is still relatively new, is some of our first customers are being closed on days they're not expecting because they didn't change their holidays. Memorial Day being a good example of that, saying, oh, changes the date. 4th of July, obviously pretty easy, always closed on 4th of July in the US, or always a holiday, I guess I should say. Incoming call handling. So this is how your system treats those main numbers when calls come in. So the default option is this first one here. Calls come in and they go to your virtual receptionist. And if you click on the virtual receptionist link, it's going to open up a new window. And you have some options here. So on the left, this is your main menu and your routing options. So press 1. This is going to a ring group. That's what this little icon means. Borderlands. 2 is going to our support group. Option 3. Okay. Hold on just a minute here. Oops. Not sure what happened there. Sorry about that. And then, so option 3 is going just straight to this user, or option 4 is going to this person's voicemail box. If you click add route, again, you can press 0 through star key, technically. And then you can have it go to any user. I have call queues on this particular account. You can go to devices, although we don't recommend doing so. We've had some odd behaviors. The same applies to media. So media would be like a message. It tends to be abrupt when the message ends and then the call ends. And some people don't like that. So we typically recommend have it go to a group, go to a user, or go to a voicemail box as your best options. And you can just click X to remove it. Over on the right, we have your greetings. Text-to-speech, you simply just type in what you want the system to say. Click update, and it'll start playing it. And you can type in, and edit to it, and just click update again instead of having to retype the whole thing. You can upload your own file. Again, it needs to be .wav or .mp3. If you've already uploaded greetings, you can choose any that you have on the system. You can record it over the phone. However, by default, this is going to a registered phone, meaning it has to be a VoIP phone. And that's for security purposes. Basically, a VoIP phone we know is connected, so we know it's for someone who's tied to this account versus any other phone. And then lastly, we have Professional Studio. We've partnered with another company called Snap Recordings. And if you click on Order here, it'll open up a new tab. and you can go through their process of getting a recording. The advantage of this is they have something like 100 different voice actors to choose from. You have, English, Spanish, English, or I think they have English, French too. They have different versions of English. And yeah, there are some bilingual options as well. Snap Recordings handles their own billing as well as the delivery of the messages. So just keep that in mind. But then they send you the file, then you would then just come here to upload it to the system. All right, this next option here, incoming call handling, you can have it go to a user, or typically a group is the next option. And then virtual receptionist. So this is an instance where you want to have someone on your staff be able to answer the call, but if for some reason they can't, it goes to virtual receptionist, so then your inbound caller can press a menu option. So like a receptionist group or front desk group kind of thing would be another good example of it. And this other option here is similar in that you can have it go to a user or to a group, but if they're not able to pick up, then they go to voicemail and leave a message. Now this is during your open hours. Now you have a tab here for lunch hours. Again, you can have different routing for your lunch. And in this case, for instance, we say, hey, come here, skip the voicemail, and just go right to this voicemail box because we're at lunch. After hours, again, same basic options, but you can have it route differently. So for instance, you have like we can say Kat here is my after hours person. She's, that's what she's hired for. Calls will go to her. And then I can choose to either have it go to a virtual receptionist if she's not able to pick up, or just have it go to a voicemail. And I would probably have it go to her voicemail so she could call back. And then lastly, you have a holiday option as well. So this is for your office holidays. All right, system does have a conference option. You can have multiple phone numbers assigned to it. Every user has the ability to host a conference, although you have to enable that as a user feature. The custom greeting is actually only a text-to-speech greeting. I know we've had at least a couple customers ask for essentially a feature request so they can have their own like uploadable greetings for the conference ridge. And then main fax box number. You can only have the one number. If you edit the fax box, this lets you change who is getting those faxes that come into your system. And they're getting them as a PDF, typically speaking. Next up over here, we have numbers. So these are the numbers on your account. What? And who they're associated with. Sorry, I keep getting weird notifications. So numbers on the account, where they're going. If you see a number in red, and you can see here it says port in. So this is a number that was being ported in. However, it hasn't completed its port. And that's why it's got the little red exclamation mark. And then you have your spare numbers. These are numbers that you're not using. So for instance, if you wanted like a block of 10 numbers in sequence, but you're only using the first 2, the other 8 would be here. Also under spare numbers, you can always buy numbers here. Port numbers is moving a number from one carrier to another. So moving it from AT&T to VirtualPBX. It has the whole process here. It's basically you would click on new port requests, you enter the number, and then follow the on-screen instructions. The main thing to remember about a port request is that both sides of the port need to be active, meaning that you have to have an account on both sides of the port. Once the port completes, if you have no other use for the account where that phone number originally came from, then you can close that account. But until it actually has completed, you can hold on a minute here. All right, let me. All right. Users, this is your full-fledged or full access users. Adding a user, pretty simple. Give them a name. So they have to have a unique email address. So that can't already be on the system. Hold on just a minute. All right. You create a password for that user. The system's gonna fill in the next extension. Default, it actually does start you off at 1000, although you can change it to whichever you want. Include in user directory or the company directory, up to you if you want it, yes or no. But we do recommend that you have this one checked, is to send credentials to the user, so that way your new user has login information and they know where to go. All right, and then once you create the user, let's see if we have one that's basically blank. So here, it'll look essentially like this. So if you click on the name, you'll have their name, you'll have the email address, the extension, etc. You can always change a user to be an admin. That's what the little blue suited people look like. The danger is if you're the only person on the account, you're obviously an admin. If you change yourself to a user, click Save Changes and log out, then there's no admin on your account. So please don't do that. This is the time zone that this user is in. So by default, you're on the account default, but you can change it. This is the flag is for the language, usually US, English, ring time, and then main extension number. You can have multiple extensions on a particular user. This is the extension box. Again, you can add additional extensions if you're so inclined. Next, we have the phone number box. This is essentially give a phone number to go directly into a particular user, bypassing your virtual receptionist or anything like that. And then here we have devices. So for a user to actually take calls, they need a device. Add from spare means you've already added them via the devices on the left-hand side, which we haven't gotten to yet. Or you can just click new device and you have your options here. SIP phone, this is a VoIP phone that uses the SIP protocol. And then we have these manufacturers available for what's called auto provisioning. Basically, you click on the manufacturer, you would click on the model phone with the name and the MAC address, and then you click create device. You still have to go into the device to make sure that you have enabled auto provisioning on the device, especially for the Yay links. But then basically after that, you just plug in the phone and it'll connect up and it's ready to work. Cell phone, type in a name, you type in +1 area code and phone number. One thing to keep in mind when we send calls to a cell phone or a landline, you'll get a message first saying, this is a forwarded call. Please press 1 to accept the call. You don't have a lot of time to press 1. And then if you don't press 1, then it goes to the system voicemail. If you want to avoid having to press 1, if you go to options, you would just put a check mark here, allow the use of cell phone's voicemail. So the system's not asking anyone to press 1, but if your cell phone voicemail picks up, it goes right to it. Soft phone, you should read the messages just for your safety. So this is for making either a software application on your computer or an application on your smartphone are the most common uses. And then lastly, you could use this to program a VoIP phone that wasn't on the SIP phone list. You have your username, or the SIP user, and the SIP password. If you just click on the box, it'll show it. This will take you to a support page on our site. Advanced, you don't really do a lot. These are the 2 codecs that you're going to need. You can always put restrictions. And then those are your other options. Web phone, that would be that web phone setup. And you give it a device name. This will take you to that web page. And then same options as before. Landline is the exact same as cell phone. I have not encountered anyone who's used a fax. This would be a digital fax, so it doesn't connect to an analog phone line. And then an ATA adapter, which we don't typically recommend, although I know some of the Cisco and Obahai devices. Let's go. All right, these are ATA adapters as far as I know. I think Cisco we only have the phones here. But typically for most ATA adapters, we don't typically recommend them anymore. I mean, these days, VoIP phones have been around long enough that they're pretty reliable technology, and usually they have more features that make them more beneficial to use than an analog phone connected to an adapter. Now, this last box over here, these are your user features. Caller ID number only works on a user that has a phone number. So we go to Jonathan Depp, for example. We go to caller ID number. We change it. It uses the phone number that he has associated with him, and then you would click save. And then he's got a little icon there. Call forwarding. Any user you can set up any user to set up call forwarding, and they actually have access to call forwarding settings on their user portal. By default, this is off. We actually typically recommend most people have failover mode. So basically, if your registered VoIP phones stop connecting, then the system will automatically send the calls over to either another desk phone or most likely a mobile, and you put the area code phone number. Up to you if you want to leave the voicemail on forwarded numbers. I typically say you don't want to do that. And then you click Save Changes. And then obviously, if you have call forwarding on, that means you know you're not going to be taking calls at your desk. One thing to keep in mind about call forwarding is that for the cell phone or landlines, they should not be devices on the user. They should just basically only be used in call forwarding and not be a device. Hot desking, if you enable it, this is typically for your VoIP phone users. This allows, and it's actually used where you have a shared office space. So people don't have assigned desks. They could be at a different desk any day of the week. But you have VoIP phones at all those positions. So they can simply log into the phone and take calls at the phone that they're sitting at, but it's still associated with their user. And essentially you type in your hot desk ID number. I usually say make it something short. Up to you if you require a PIN. And the main thing you'd want to tell your users if you're using this is to remind them to log out of the phone. So hot desk in, hot desk out, and that way phones aren't ringing at all given times. Every user has a voicemail box, which is why they have voicemails featured. The voicemail box that's created with the user is intrinsically tied to that user. So if you delete it and then try to recreate it, it no longer has that tie. So just keep that in mind. Users can have their own fax boxes. Not commonly used, to be honest. Most companies are fine with just having a main fax. Follow me calling. This is if you have multiple devices. So this is not going to work here. Let me go up here to cat. Okay. And this is where you would actually work better if you have multiple devices. It's going to follow me on multiple devices. So here you can just determine what device rings when and for how long. This box, you can always increase the total time if you want to, measured in seconds, and you can do things like that. Now, the one thing you want to avoid is having a gap. You have a gap, that means the system's going to hang up in between the two callers, or the two devices. Just on hold. This is for when your staff member puts someone on hold on their VoIP phone, so they can have their own customized music. And then customized call recording. So if you have call recording enabled on your account, then you can enable it on your users. So inbound internal or inbound external. Basically calls coming in to this user. If they're internal, that means they're from another user on the account. If they're external, that means they're from someone outside the company. And then outbound external or internal, meaning they're calling some other user. And then outbound external, your user is calling someone outside the company. All right, well, it looks like no one is here. So we'll go ahead and end.